have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. We got a real tall order today. We're going to deal with Jimmy Kimmel, Charlie Kirk, the whole issues around context and canceling. And we're going to do that backwards, starting with context and canceling, so we'll work back toward Jimmy Kimmel. But our objective here is to find grace in each one of these kinds of situations. And I'm confident that Jim can do that. I'm less confident that I can do it. But we're here to do that and to offer a graceful response to this entire situation that just keeps escalating. And Jim, help me out with, I read some stuff about context and canceling that just made my skin crawl. It really did. Because, you know, as people who are dealing with the book, the Bible, we are always in the position of trying to establish context for what we read and understand and practice there. So this is very close to my heart as someone who's trying to do a good job with practice. But give us the background on this with the current issue about Charlie Kirk and context.
Okay, so we just found out as we're recording here that Jimmy was canceled.
Yes.
I don't know if cancel is the right word. It's probably too strong. He's on pause, but he could be canceled. I suspect he could be back in a couple of weeks too.
Well, he's certainly the punching bag for the latest attempt by the administration to silence their critics.
And we definitely should have a discussion about what he actually said, how comedy actually works. There's some things we should go through.
Yeah.
But I'm going to throw out an initial statement to you that's very, very, very hard. Because if I do my job correctly today, either you're, most people should be mad at me. Most people should want to take up stones on both sides. The one thing that the enemy should come to agree on is that I should be silenced.
Well, isn't that an indication of offering grace? I mean, that's generally the response that you get.
Yeah,
but
I want to
that one get, not you, but what one gets when they're offering a middle way, right?
Yeah, I want to be a little more prophetic today. So here's a line to hang things on. It's a line we can return to throughout this discussion.
Okay.
As a general rule, not a principle, it's not cause and effect, but as a general rule, normally, progressives innovate new powers and conservatives consecrate them a generation later. Let me say that again.
That's not bad. Progressives innovate new powers.
Conservatives consecrate them a generation later. And so I noticed this first in my own life, in my conversion to becoming a libertarian. I believe that small government is beautiful and that we should be constitutionally limited and that being conservative that was its track. And then I found out I was wrong, like completely wrong. Like Republicans love big government as much or more than, and they do it in a way that they protest too much. So
yes, I know what you mean, right?
1996, Bob Dole is the Republican candidate for president of the United States. He is resigning. This is a very pivotal moment in my life. He is resigning from the Senate to campaign full time. I think it's roughly June of 1996. And he's in tears. And he says his greatest accomplishment is saving Social Security. Now, a little bit of history. He first entered the House of Representatives in the 1960s as a wounded veteran. And he was campaigning against Medicare and Medicaid. Johnson's Great Society projects. So in the space of a generation, one man went from loving the big Democratic, opposing the big Democratic welfare state to loving it, embracing it, saving
it. Yeah.
And I see this pattern happen again and again. There are exceptions. I'm not going to deny that there are times that the right side innovates, but it's rare. So as we get into what we're going to discuss today, I want to point out, so you said, let's start with context. we have this state of affairs that were going on in recent years, really over the past decade, of something I call blue church. And it's not my phrase. My friend Max Borders gave it to me, and he got it from somewhere else. I do not remember the source of it, but blue church. So we have an absence, a general absence of religious activity and faith that's growing more and more with each passing year throughout the 21st century. There is some evidence in some quarters, especially in the younger generation, that maybe there's some degree of reversal happening on this subject, but church attendance is definitely way down. Church membership and affiliation way down. A lot of the normal things that we consider to be religious indicators when we're doing polling down.
Sure. Yeah.
And obviously I've got no serious problem with that because I don't go to church either, right? I'm what's called a done, and this show is in part of ministry to people like me who don't feel comfortable in organized religion's pews. But progressives began to build a new religion based on the state. The state has a lot of things about it that are very cult-like, right? It is an all-powerful being that will solve all of our problems. And if we pray to it through lobbying and voting and other means, then hopefully we can get our social problems solved, whatever those are. They'll lift the burdens off of our shoulders. They will be more effectual than God himself. And this has become something of an article of faith. Now, in the teens, there was a shift that began to occur where certain issues had been matters of tolerance for 30 or 40 years. And the real problem, the real threats to speech came from the right through their desires to censor for moral purposes. The moral majority, the silent majority, yada, yada. Like there was real reason to be concerned about that. And I know that's a big part of your personal story, right?
Yep.
But something shifted within the last 10 or so years, and maybe even a bit more. And I won't get into my big, deep theory as to how we got here. I've talked about some of this before in other episodes, but it's not just Donald Trump. So we live in a time where you're expected to understand certain intersectional differences between persons. Some persons have more challenges and problems than you do, and other persons have still more challenges than them, and they come in with this victim status that anoints them, which we've also discussed where that comes from here on this show, and why and more importantly, it's so powerful to be the victim. And you're just expected to know. You're not allowed to ask questions, and you're certainly not allowed to ask for context. In fact, to ask for context, I shared a comment with you by a supposed libertarian.
Right.
Who said that to ask for context on a subject was to invite apologetic for it. Now, my alarm bells go off because I know what religion is. I know how to study theology. And so I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, that's religious language. So an apologetics is defense of the faith. That's what it means.
Yes.
So an apologist is somebody who knows how to explain why the Bible's true, what its source and origin is, why it's the word of God, why Jesus rose from the dead, or by the way, pick another religion and their doctrine, and they understand the scientific and the literary and the cultural reasons that faith is true, and on it goes, right? They can give you a metaphysic. They can go beyond, right? And they can go stand in a public square and they could say, these are the reasons, this is why you should have the same epistemology that I do.
And that's a scholarly context. That's a studied, educated kind of context for what it is that supports their statements.
Right. But in this quote by this supposed libertarian that I shared with you, to say that you're turning it into an apologetic for the spokesperson who is clearly speaking evil. And in this case, it literally was Charlie Kirk that was being discussed. We can't have context on what Charlie Kirk said, because if we have context on what Charlie Kirk says, that is akin to defending him. That is akin to making it possible that his platform gets bigger. He's wider and stronger, and his bigotry and all his hatred and all his anti-this and that and the other go up the intersectional ladder, just hit them all. They all start to fall out, And we can't have that. We just simply cannot have that, is the argument that's being made. And this is, to my mind, a blue church argument. I don't care. By the way, I told you I'm going to offend them. Maybe you're like, this isn't a religion. It is. Man, is it a religion?
Oh, it's a belief system. All right. Yes.
And you're saying I have to worship in exactly the same way you do. It's no different than a church fight over whether drums should be on the stage or hymnals in the pews in front. It's no different in whether or not, we're discussing whether abortion is or isn't right. It is a religious issue that is being put front and center. And then you're saying you can't ask questions, you can't debate, and by God, you cannot get context. If we took the time to cut the clip and show you the bad statement and tell you this person deserves to be stoned, the matter's closed. If you ask for context, you are empowering bad, and you're a bad guy. Only we, the priests, have the ability to cut the clip and tell you what parts of it you need to know.
This is so pharisaical.
And this is blue church in action.
Yeah.
Okay? So they're probably turning me off, but I'm going to go one step further. And I'm going to suggest that what's happening with Jimmy Kimmel right now is an example of all that fruit come home to roost. Because what did I say? Progressives innovate new powers. Conservatives consecrate them a generation later. So, if you say, wait a minute, you didn't get the context on Charlie's quote. Well, would you like the context on Jimmy's quote?
Sure.
Would you like to know what it was that Jimmy actually said?
Oh, of course. They're not going to tell you, because that would be that would weaken their position in the blue church.
It's worse than that.
Seriously.
And by the way, this is red church now, because they have left and walked out and they've paganized their religion, right? So they're trying right now to turn Charlie into a martyr.
Yeah.
They're adding there's a hagiography going on. In other words, they're making him more godlike, more angelic, more whatever than he ever was. Okay. He's more Charlie than he ever was. Okay. Right. And they're worshiping the state in the process, but they're also worshiping vengeance at this moment. They are so upset that he's been shot. They feel so victimized that every one of the things that they're doing right now is a direct contradiction in principle to the things that they opposed just a few years ago. When progressives were innovating new powers to censor them, they didn't like it, and they talked about cancel culture. Now, a guy who I will not even utter his name because I think he doesn't even belong on this platform. He's not even good enough for this platform, but he's very popular, has suggested that there's somehow or other difference between cancel culture and I think they're calling it challenge culture now.
Culture?
Yeah, he's saying, well, wait, if you cancel culture was digging up something that somebody wrote 10 years ago and then taking their job away from this. This is something that somebody said like 5 minutes ago, and they are being held accountable for it. No, it's cancel culture. I don't care what other names you give to it. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, comes out and says, we're going to have the Civil Rights Division looking into criticisms of people who celebrated Charlie's death for hate speech.
Yep.
Hate speech. Now, just a couple of years ago, we were so young back then.
Oh my gosh.
We were told that bake the cake was a violation of civil rights. And you know what? It was. But there is a Civil Rights Division who has a law now where they can impose upon people. And she cited the very same powers that once were used to compel people to bake cakes. And that shouldn't have happened then. And it shouldn't happen now. So let's do Jimmy the favor that we're not supposed to give him today because red church decides to duplicate blue church. In his opening monologue on Monday, Mr. Kimmel said, we hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang, desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
So factually true.
Well, it just depends on how you read it. So,
I I'd have to question his definitely one of them statement. I mean, he's definitely not a liberal.
He says anything other than one of them,
Yeah.
referring to Republicans. Anything other than one of them, referring more specifically to MAGA types. Okay. Anything other than one of them. Okay. Did he actually say that this was a MAGA type or Republican in that quote?
No.
Anything other than one of them. Okay, let me give you a couple of different, we steelman here because we use grace. Let me give you a couple different interpretations. First, he could be saying there's many theories out there, and that is technically true, right? Even on the right, there are a bunch of theories out there for what happened that the political right wants to believe. The people who are in that group would prefer to believe. For example, there's not yet sufficient evidence to say this was the result of any conspiracy by even a small gang on the left to target Charlie. So let me be technical and explain exactly what I mean when I say that. If you're going to say the left killed Charlie, you got to figure out how to make it about more than one lone nut. And there are people who are saying, wait, there's this Twitter account, there's this Twitter account, there's this over here, and there's this rhetoric over here, and there's this thing, and then the other. And there's no direct evidence for any of that or any group or conspiracy. You can't say the left. You can't collectivize that and say it's everybody that holds these views. You're completely irresponsible, and now you've shot us. And one Republican commentator said that. And there's been a bunch of them, but I'm aware of one in particular that I just was surprised and disturbed that this particular individual did that. I thought better. And so there's no conspiracy here, but the language is conspiratorial in nature.
Well, sure. The high priest of the Red Church says it's so you have to believe him and drink the Kool-Aid.
Well, which is it? Is it a lone nut or is it a conspiracy? Tell me which it is. Just pick a side. Yeah. Go down that side. If you believe that this is a lone nut, if you believe this is the person who should be prosecuted for this, and that's exactly how the texts read, as if they're a confession. The text that we have as of this week, that's exactly how they read, as a full annotated confession of lone nuttery.
Yep.
Okay? But then let's steel man another way. Let's try a second way. He could be saying that Donald Trump's own behavior and rhetoric is violent in the exact same way that many members of the political right have seemingly weaponized Kirk's murder. They have been saying that speech leads to violence.
Yeah.
Ergo, Kimmel says, you're right. It's your president's speech. And I don't think this is far-fetched because remember where we started. Blue Church believes words are violence. They've been arguing this for the last 10 years.
Yes.
Mere words are not violence. Now, I had somebody this week say to me, no, what about threats? That's a completely different matter.
Threat is a different matter.
And the law treats it as such. That you're not raising any new thought that none of us have ever thought of before. Mere words are not violence.
Okay, but the incitement to violence using words is a threat.
Okay. For whatever it's worth, I don't agree with the people on the right or the left that can make the claim that either Donald Trump is responsible for that violence that happened there, directly culpable, or that Jimmy Kimmel or any of his allies and friends are responsible for it.
Yeah, it's equally absurd.
I'm not responsible for it. This is not, I don't care what they said in public, short of go do whatever. So I was going to get to a third steelman, but let me go, since you just brought this up, let me say, there is an FCC regulation about hoaxes. It is section 73.1217.
Was this like a response to the War of the Worlds that Orson Welles did back in the?
Well, okay. Let me give you. This is for broadcast licensees. Let's say the Federal Communications Commission, and they're going to come up in this context. I suspect we're going to end up talking about them because it's the thing that bothers me most about what's happening to Kimmel.
Yeah,
I don't watch Kimmel. I don't care for Kimmel. I'm not a fan of Kimmel. I stopped watching Kimmel a long time ago. I don't watch really any of those shows. Ever since Craig Ferguson left late night network television, I haven't None of them appeal to me. I don't watch any of them. Okay, so that's how far back I go. That's pre-Trump. I'm already off the boat. But in recent years, some of the things that they've done, their propaganda on behalf of the state during the worldwide sickness was appalling to me. It was offensive to me. I didn't like how they talked about me and other people in those shows. So no, I don't listen. I don't think he's funny. Kimmel had one incredibly funny bit. One incredible. He used to do a segment called "This Week in Unnecessary Censorship," where they would
I remember this.
random words. Oh, it was a scream. That was funny.
Yeah,
that was funny. But for the most part, no. So the rule for hoaxes prohibits broadcast licensees or permittees from broadcasting false information concerning either two C words, crime or catastrophe. Okay. 3 standards. The licensee knows this information is false. So that gets directly to their own knowledge. Did they know better?
Did they know?
Chances are, if you believe that Kimmel says what you're being told by the right-wing media, if you believe what those various sources are saying, then you think he knew that what he was saying was a lie, that he was saying that the right did it and it's a lie. It's not what he said. We've already gone through 2 examples. 2, it is foreseeable that the broadcast of information will cause substantial public harm. So foreseeable, you can see it. Hold on to that thought because we're going to explain what that means in a moment. But number 3, broadcast of the information, in fact, directly causes substantial public harm. So it's either foresee or it does.
Yes.
Now, for the purposes of this rule, they define the term public harm in this setting. It must begin immediately and cause direct and actual damage to property or to the health or safety of the general public or the diversion of law enforcement or other public health and safety authorities from their duties. Okay, let's just go through them. Did it happen? Was there suddenly riots from Jimmy Kimmel? Jimmy Kimmel tells the joke, and then what happened?
Right.
Well, nothing, because hardly anybody, nothing, because hardly anybody's watching a show, folks. The ratings are terrible, okay? So nothing happened. Did it cause harm to property? Was property damaged?
Not that we can tell.
No. How about the health or safety of the general public?
No, I'm still pretty healthy. How about you?
Yeah.
We're general public.
Did it divert law enforcement or other authorities, safety authorities?
Oh, I don't know. Is ICE present at wherever Jimmy broadcasts his program?
Well, I would hope that they're watching in that case, but because at least they wouldn't be arresting somebody. But okay.
But nothing changed.
So,
I mean, it didn't.
People are with a straight face saying, "Oh, this is fraud." If you're engaged in hoaxes, the FCC's dealt with this, and they're well within their power to say Jimmy's joke is not merely bad taste. It's a case of fraud,
fraudulent and harmful. It's got to make both.
Yeah. Now, but if we go back to Blue Church, just a couple of years ago.
Well, who's bringing all these charges against all the broadcast of Blue Church?
Misinformation.
That's my point.
Disinformation.
Also my point.
Malinformation.
Shall I say it again?
Go ahead.
Hello, Blue Church. Hello, Red Church.
Well, okay, but this was being propagated actively.
Actively, yes.
Actively.
I mean, Limbaugh was concerned that his license would be revoked.
This show is brought to you by the Zero Aggression Project. Zap newsletter subscribers get alerts when each episode is released. The Zap website is also the pathway by which you can contact us by email and support the show. This program operates thanks to tax-deductible Zap contributions, and we appreciate your support. So, zap the state, and have a nice day.
By the way, the third way that we could give Jimmy some context for his statement. We've since learned the motive, and the accused is, according to the texts that have been broadcast or published, said to his lover, quote, "I've had enough of his," referring to Charlie Kirk's, "hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out," end quote. But you know what? There's even confusing signals here. The bullet casings had engraved symbols from gaming culture.
Yep.
That wasn't necessarily a political statement.
Not a political statement.
And I've got to tell everybody who is my age and even a little bit younger than me, let alone, guys as old as you, Bill.
Yeah. Old geezers like me.
Gaming culture amongst the teens and 20 somethings is completely like, if you are trying to apply the left-right spectrum, some people are conservative and some people are liberal. News at 11. If you're trying to put that view into them, oh my gosh, your head's going to explode when you read what they write. There is no ideological coherence. There is no philosophical coherence in this culture. It is entirely about having the best memes or knowing how to converse eloquently in those memes. Folks, they speak a language you cannot even comprehend. It might look a lot like English, but you don't understand it. You don't know it. And it exists in symbols and pictures and jokes and anecdotes that have a relevance that is extraordinary to them and almost meaningless to you. And that's part of why they enjoy it so much. Now, when you were a kid, depending on what generation you came from, you had a few words. You had a few words that you liked to use that your parents looked at you screwy every time you used them, maybe even corrected you and tried to get you to speak like an adult, right? That were fine with you, right? And they were part of your generation, right? Maybe some people watching this might even remember Groovy. That was not a hit with the parents back then, right?
Yep. Didn't work.
Okay, so the generation after generations had something like this. Doesn't even compare. This is it times 100.
And dare we say this is a context which has yet to be penetrated by any of the critics out there?
So I'm watching the media fumble around trying to figure out, and I'm watching these analysts. Trump, is he from the left? Is he motivated by this? Is he motivated by that? Did he get this speech from here and there? I know that they're out to get us. This is about killing conservatives. No. I mean, we've got the bullets marked with stuff that is not explicitly political messages. Even the one that said, hey, catch.
Right.
Even that one comes from a game. Do you want to know inside that world what the bigger debate was? Not whether that was right or left, not whether that was even a political statement. Which was the real origin? Which game was the real origin? Which game was he referring to when he used that version of the quote?
Well, that's really obvious. I mean, it's obviously the point that all of us should be discussing right now. Red church, blue church, whatever, who cares?
So there's three different ways now that I just steelmanned what Jimmy said and provided potentially some other context. But I want to give one other that should be so obvious to everyone that I can't even believe I have to say it. I can't believe at this juncture that I'm sitting here, especially after what we just went through. I can't believe that I'm having to say this out loud. I mean, some of the people that I'm going to be talking to here as I say this were saying exactly what I'm about to say 18 months ago. You don't censor comedy. The point of a joke is to laugh. The point of a joke is to laugh. And guess what? Comedy is incredibly subjective. I find some things funny that you don't find funny. You might even find them in bad taste. But just because they're not your taste, you can't shut them down.
Right.
So Dave Chapelle stands up and he heroically goes on Netflix. And I do mean heroically. Again, I told you, I'm offending everybody here today. He goes on Netflix and he says, you want to know what my problem is? You know what my number one problem is? I'll tell you what my number one problem is. And people are starting to shout things like, no, you want to know what my problem is? It's you. It's you and you and you. You're a pain in my bleep, right? Because people get offended by the things he says. Some of them want to fight. Some of them want to cancel him. And after his last stand-up at Netflix, that's exactly what happened. There was a group of people who thought they could hold the company hostage over this. And he didn't bend. In fact, he went over to England and told more jokes about those people, which was appropriate in that arena.
Yes.
I'm doing Gracearchy here, but in comedy, that's exactly what should have happened. They get roasted. They get roasted. And they deserve it.
Yep.
Oh, they were so hurt. They were so upset. They were so angry because words are violence.
Well,
And
ever
they were-
since, what is it, political correctness ruined comedy for me.
Yes. So good Americans, real Americans, the kind that wear red hats, said, good for Chapelle. Good for him, right? Wasn't your ox getting gored at that moment. And suddenly today, oh, we can't tell a joke.
The shoe's on the other foot.
Just 18 months ago, they all got this.
Yeah, they were all over it, like it was the right thing to do. But now that it's their ox being gored, or perhaps their bull is probably the better way of putting that. So how do we, I want to start with Charlie. Where's the grace for Charlie Kirk right now? And I'll tell you how I found that after you explained the way that you have embraced grace for what turns out to be a pretty courageous guy in spite of all the threats and everything else.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
How do you offer grace to Charlie right now? We have like all the conflicting memories that always come up after somebody who's known in the public passes away. So
I actually do believe that it is appropriate to be honest about who he was and recognize his humanity, which includes the fact that he has flaws. And when we did the episode immediately following, where we kind of analyzed the assassination,
right,
the cultural aspects of it, I came away with the belief that it was good that he was able to come out on one level and participate in the public discussion to create dialogue. I believe that was that lemonade moment.
Yeah.
But I also believed it was incomplete, and that advocating for the state to be involved and fix various social problems was going to lead, because its tool is coercion, physical coercion, was inevitably going to lead to cultural flashpoints. And it means that people are going to get hurt. Violence will be done. To advocate for your government to take action X or Y means you want them to point the sword, the sharp end of the sword, at somebody. And it's not surprising to me that some people react badly to that. Doesn't justify it, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
In the days since, I don't believe if you believe that Charlie had deserved what he had coming to him, first, you're wrong, and it's kind of sick. But from a grace perspective, I would go further. So what Charlie experienced was a form of capital punishment. And I'm opposed to capital punishment, particularly as it's practiced in this country, but I don't know if any other country practices it any better. There's a number of problems with it. But one, Catholics should recognize what I'm saying here. One of them is that you hope for the redemption of the human person. And the longer they're alive, the longer they have to find that forgiveness and redemption and restoration. And then maybe even the ability to atone and provide recompense to their victims. So let's assume that you believe that Charlie's words actually were violence. You would still want him to repent at some point. You would still want him to have, and repentance just means a turning around, right? A reversal of course. You'd want him to change his mind. And I clearly had some things I wish Charlie didn't say or said differently. But I don't believe I've made the situation better, and we can see it hasn't. We can objectively see it hasn't. It was predictable. It's actually made things more coarse, more ugly, and we're more on a hairstring. And so I'm sitting, Bill, watching RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, in early April 1968. He gets told, and this is before everybody had cell phones in their hands. I listened to the crowd as he addressed them that night when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. And he's the one that breaks the news to them. Today, you know exactly what would happen. Everybody would instantly be on their phones. Some people would be running back. I left my phone in the car, or whatever. Like they would need to start. They wouldn't want to pay attention to what he said. But he said some words that were moving and stirring and noble. Great. But more significantly, he was in Indianapolis that night. And there were riots that broke out across the country. there were no riots in Indianapolis that night. Not only that, not only did he manage to appeal to people's better angels at that moment in a very, very difficult moment. So it was an exhibition of grace. But roughly 2 months later, he's gone.
Yeah.
So, we're still new to this Charlie Kirk assassination. I sincerely hope it's the very last one. I hope this is it. People who want their pound of flesh and their vengeance, stop. People who think that this was something good to start, stop. You're going to make things worse. I'm not really a fan of shame or stigma, and we go a long way to avoid trying to do those things here at this show. But I'm going to say society cannot exist without them either, near as I can tell.
There
has to be
guardrails.
some boundaries and limits. Yes.
Yep. Boundaries. Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to weaponize stigma. I've spoken out already on this show against boycotting. I believe boycotting is an act of aggression. The reason I believe this is that the people that are most likely to be harmed and impacted on it are not usually the target that you're really after. They're the people who work at the company.
Yeah.
Who may or may not approve.
Yeah.
Or even know what it is that their boss funds or does, and they have no control over what they do. And so, I think there's risk in that. So there's the same thing's true here. I was thinking, so they're probably going to, here's what I foresee happening. They're probably going to tell Jimmy, you can have your show back if you will come back on and apologize.
For a joke?
Yes. No, exactly. No. He's going to probably have to do that. There'll probably have to be some step in the process for him to get back his show. And there's a thing he's going to have to weigh out at the moment that he does it. Because your reaction was the right one. To be like, I don't have anything to apologize for. I was telling a joke. And as I just pointed out, he didn't say what they all said he said. They're not quoting him. They don't have a good quote. They have a joke that they have made say something else because they're sensitive, because they're snowflakes. You remember snowflakes?
Oh, yeah.
These people on the right are they're happy about this. They're snowflakes. Okay. So I don't think has to apologize. Okay. But I think he's probably going to do it because there's people that work on his show. That's their job. He's not just responsible for himself. He's going to think about all the other people that work there. If it were me, that would be one of the considerations I'd be weighing.
I agree with that. But unlike Colbert, who didn't have a choice. But here's the thing, Jimmy, just all of them. So why are they on network television anyway? I mean, we've had those shows there. Obviously, it's a silly question, but there's so many other ways that get the word out that don't involve, the administration's hovering over every word they say.
So I think you're raising a valid point, but I want to turn it on its head. So first, we got to make sure everybody's clear what the valid point is. The Federal Communications Commission should not exist. The idea that the federal government licenses out and then subsequently controls, because the gold rule is in effect here, not the one that you were taught in Sunday school.
Not that one. Yep.
He who has the gold rules. So since the government is the licensee of all these things, they get to, and they also get to control mergers and acquisitions.
Yep.
They get to decide who says what. And that just simply shouldn't be. Let me ask you a question. I won't forget yours, but I want to ask you a question. Are you a fan of the equal time doctrine? Does this seem like a good idea to you?
This is a really crazy thing. And my question has always been, well, how are you going to manage that? It'd be nice to know that all points of views are equally represented.
Well, they never were.
And they never were.
Assumed that there was two sides to everything.
Right. And they never were. But, it's one of those, that would be nice. But making a doctrine out of that is a slippery slope.
Okay, and so that was the rule until the very late 1980s. That media stations, radio and television, had to provide "quote unquote" equal time, and they also had to do public interest programming. So what FCC Chair Brendan Carr is openly talking about here right now is a resurrection of what's called the public interest standard. This is something that when the Democrats held the House of Representatives for 40 consecutive uninterrupted years, that Republicans said we got to get rid of. They did get rid of it. And a guy named Rush Limbaugh came along. Rush Limbaugh was not possible until this law was changed.
Yep.
Now, some of you are going, well, we need that doctrine back. But you don't want it now because of the fact that FCC Chair Brendan Carr is there. And Republicans are in ascendancy right now. And in the 21st century, they have controlled the House far more than, and the White House more than the Democrats have. So, oh boy, you really want to let it go back to that power? You want to give that power to them? But here is a Republican appointee arguing against free expression, against free speech, against letting the chips fall where they may. And he told Emily Jashinsky on her show on August 4th that local broadcasting companies need to resurrect the public interest standard. So that brings us to Nexstar. So the way that the house of cards tumbles for Jimmy Kimmel is that first there is an outcry about the fact that he said the joke on Monday night.
Yeah.
That outcry reaches Nexstar, who has business before the federal government. They are in the midst of a merger. They are attempting to do an acquisition right now. They are nowhere. This is a company that is dwarfed in size by ABC and Disney.
And by the way, they're an ABC affiliate, right?
They're an affiliate. They have a group of stations that are broadcasting ABC content, and there are contractual arrangements that require them to follow the ABC schedule to be a part of it. So
Right.
it's like a franchise, right? You don't open up a McDonald's and then suddenly have the big bill.
Right.
And leave the special sauce off, right? That's not how that works. You have to do the Big Mac, and you got to make it the way that they expect. That's how it works. So if you are an ABC affiliate, you run ABC programming. They have certain rules that make some exceptions for that, usually for sports. But for the most part, no, you're going to run exactly the programming we provide, and you're going to pay for it either way. Even if you don't, even if you didn't run it, you're still going to pay for it. So, Nexstar is running, it has some affiliates running ABC programming, and they are big enough to make an impact on ABC. And they're not that big, but they're big enough to do that. And they say, we're not going to run Jimmy Kimmel. So here's the statement that they put out. Mr. Kimmel's comments about the death of Mr. Kirk are offensive and at a critical time in our national discourse. And we now believe the spectrum of opinions, views, or values of local communities were represented here. Continuing to give Mr. Kimmel a broadcast platform in the community is not in the public interest at the current time, and we have made the decision to preempt his show in an effort to let cooler heads prevail as we move, the word's cut off here, respectful, constructive dialogue. So in essence, they're saying they're just going to let cooler heads prevail. They're going to let this go for a little bit. They're probably willing to bring it back, but the administration seized on this quickly. They seized on this incredibly quickly. So once again, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is back on this time with Benny Johnson, and he says, we can do this the easy way, which means that these affiliates and Disney itself takes out their laundry, or we can do this the hard way. He said he literally offers the easy or the hard way. You know, as in, it'd be a real shame if something happened to your network here. That's violence in
Welcome
action.
to America.
Yeah, that's extortative behavior.
Yep.
And of course, Nexstar has an incentive to go along, not just because of community standards, but because they're worried about this merger. And the FCC chair is dangling this, a sword of threat above their head.
Now, we aren't even close to the First Amendment here.
No.
But we are in criminal territory because this is a genuine threat. This is legally a threat.
It is legally a threat.
And yet there is not a prosecutor in, maybe, I don't know, in the Justice Department, there's not a prosecutor in power who can fix this legally.
Right. So
it's just not going to happen.
I'm on the radio almost every Thursday with Gary Nolan. And there are various flashpoints. Like if you do this, 40, 45 times a year, shows start to blend together, you forget things. But there's certain moments that stick out in my mind. And one of those moments that happened in this decade was that there was a particular morning when he and the callers to the show were very, very vexed by the fact that social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and so on, were censoring, banning, shadow banning, blocking removing people. And at the time, we did not yet know that actors from inside our own government had direct access and communications and even bullied these companies into these various bans that went all the way up to the point that the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, was kicked off of Twitter. And everybody was like, we got to do something. We got to do something. We got to do something. We got to bring these companies to heel. We need a law. We need a law. Our problem is that the current law doesn't hold them responsible, doesn't make them do the right thing. We need a law. And I kept saying, no, you do not want the state to solve this. First, I recognize they're not serving anything resembling a customer. And people say, well, on social media, you're the product. Well, there's truth to that. But they still need us to show up and play the game. And people were getting upset and they were leaving and they were building alternative platforms. Well, those platforms aren't big enough. They can't compete. There's this giant, monopolist power. They've got us blocked in. So one of the things that comes with age is the experience of seeing something happen. And then time goes by and then it happens again. And you're like, wait, this looks a lot like that. I recognize a pattern here. So let me give you one of those. It's the same one I gave that very day. I said that I was watching Ayn Rand being interviewed by Phil Donahue on his show. Now, for the young people in the audience, Phil Donahue had a talk show. It was what you would call syndicated on television, and it was available like right before dinner time.
Yeah, it was like late afternoon.
Yeah, late afternoon. And they would do this talk show, and they had different people up on stage being questioned. He had Ayn Rand. This is the late 70s. He's got Ayn Rand up on his stage. And she's, she dies in the early 80s. So, it's late in her life. And she's answering a question about the power of major corporations. And she mentions two corporations. I still remember what they were. It was Exxon and ITT. So Exxon was a big oil company. You might think Exxon-Mobil. Well, Mobil was at the time a separate, very large oil company. The two have since merged, Exxon-Mobil, and it's not even top 10 in market cap anymore. But at the time, it was the biggest company in the country. And then right alongside it, ITT. I didn't say ATT or AT&T, ITT, and it no longer exists. It was a conglomerate that got broke up into 1,000 pieces. And I'm sure parts of those pieces are out there. But the conglomerate, the power that it had as a giant organization, gone. It's no longer there. And all the companies that make up our top market cap right now were nowhere near that point if they even existed back then. And so I said to the audience, this too shall pass. Time is destiny. They're overplaying their hand. They're flying too close to the sun. They're fully hubris. They're doing what they should not be doing. They will pay for it. And by the way, there's a name for this in economics. It's called creative destruction. Every company does this. Every company gets so big for its britches that it can't feel or see what it's doing anymore. And young upstarts come along and figure out how to knock it out. And we all benefit from this process. And so I knew this was going to happen. I didn't know exactly the shape of it. I didn't recognize, for example, that Elon was going to buy Twitter, bring in the kitchen sink and say, we're changing everything. I didn't know any of that was going to happen. You can't necessarily predict the way, but I just knew it was going to. I knew that things were going to change. And so we should have confidence in these situations that there is an ability to get past these stuff, that there is ability to escape this stuff. We should not live just in the present moment, always responding to the fears of those moments and then doing the very worst thing, the thing that we know better than to do, which is to turn this into a bitter civil war and say, the state's going to be on my side. It's not going to.
It's not going to help.
No, it'll make matters worse. So I think that the Jimmy Kimmel thing is pretty serious. And I think you have a situation here where just a few years ago, the violators of the First Amendment, who remain unpunished to this day, that were working for the Biden administration. And by the way, another great socialist president by the name of Donald Trump, he was making the request first. They were censoring and silencing people of dissenting views. You couldn't have said on this very, on the 2BU, you could not have said that the sickness had an origin in a certain scientific facility, you would have been instantly banned. You'd have been off that platform.
Deplatformed.
And then that was a product of the government then. And the idea that now we would have new targets for the government today, it's not better because it's different targets, but I'll tell you why it's happening. Because progressives innovated new powers, and conservatives said, hold my beer. Oh, no, wait. The rest of the quote was, conservatives consecrate them a generation later. And these days, a generation is, merely a presidential inauguration away.
What's that famous meme that you have? A politician that you love
Empathy
today?
for your, I call it empathy for your future self.
Yep.
The power that you give a politician you like today to do something you love is a power that will be used tomorrow by a politician you hate to do things that you loathe. I'm sorry. Yes, we'll go with that. That's a version of it. Yep. I messed up the end of it, but it still came out perfectly.
It did.
And that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
So do we have to thank the progressives for this place that we're in right now?
Billy Joel said we didn't start the fire.
Great
I'm
song,
a little more
by the way.
gracious than that. I'm a little more gracious than that. I believe this has been going on and on and on. And when I sit here and do this show, I'm trying to offer people an invitation to get off of this, get out, escape it, help make the world a little bit better.
But this process seems to be like a rhythmical thing. We have a crisis, we find a scapegoat, boom, and then we come back and it rolls for a while, and then we have another crisis, we find a scapegoat, and we start over.
Well, here's another dirty little secret that actually, once you learn it, you start to feel a little better. You start to feel a little more peace. And that is that the people that are the loudest are the ones you're hearing from. And the loudest ones are the most angry and the most passionate and the most intense.
Well, if we could only find some way to silence them, Jim, we'd be good.
But they are not the majority. They're not even close.
Yeah.
There's a Pareto principle in everything, and it's like 80-20, and it's the 20% that are doing all this, and the 20% are divided. But the 80% can agree they don't like the rest, the 20%. They can agree that at least they don't want them to have voice. And so today, if you felt bad about some of the things that I said because it seemed like it struck too close to home, then please stop, contemplate, and pray. Because that's a problem. That's an indication of a problem. But if on the other hand, you said, oh, no, wait a minute, I get this, then I want you to know there's a reason to hope that is the minority view, that we do have standards, that you're not alone and feel this. I'm here to tell you, I'm here to speak up and say, there's a lot of people who feel like I do, who are looking at this situation right now and saying, stop the world. Let's get off of this. Let's get to something better. And they recognize it. And in fact, I'm going to cap it off by saying to you that when Pam Bondi suggested that that they should force people using the Civil Rights Division to honor Charlie's memory, there were a lot of big name conservatives who came out of the woodwork and got her to flip her position by a day later. So I see that there is enough good. There is a sufficient enough good. I don't know if it will prevent all the violence because of the intentions of the people involved, but I can see that it's nowhere near as bad as it sounds on TV or social media.
Thanks for that, Jim.
Thank you.
Gives me hope.
Grace.